Glamour, Bernie Sanders has fought Hillary Clinton to a draw so far, matching every one of her Katy Perry's with a Susan Sarandon of his own. We mentioned earlier that Spike Lee is now feeling the burn, but Sanders also has another celebrity secret weapon, or maybe that should be a lethal weapon. Last night I spoke with one of the stars of that storied cinematic franchise, Danny Glover, outside the American Theater on King Street in downtown Charleston. I started by asking Mr. Glover why he's supporting the socialist from Vermont.
Well, I come here to support Bernie Sanders because I think he's an extraordinary statesman, an extraordinary citizen, and certainly I believe in his message. And it's not about Bernie Sanders, the personality. It's Bernie Sanders and the message that he brings here.
Did you know much about him before he ran for president?
Yes, I did know something about it. I happen to know him. I remember him as mayor. I remember him as in Congress, and I remember how he always stood up in the face of enormous odds in the service of justice.
Right. And what are the when you think about the issues that he advocates, what are the ones that matter most to you?
Well, it was certainly the issue around inequity in this country. He's identified the prison system and the mass incarceration as a breakdown within the justice system, and he's willing to tackle that. We know the numbers. The numbers don't lie. The number of African American and Latino men and women who are in jail, incarcerated, and what that means in terms of them being full-fledged citizens. And so we know those stories. Right. But I think he stands up for that. Those are two. Certainly we have so many issues. He's not just a one-issue politician. The issue around climate change and global warming, which is a major. The issues around what is happening on Wall Street, which seems to get a great deal of the attention. We saw the Great Recession and the impact that had on families, particularly young and single black women as they lost their homes in the housing crisis. So all these issues are on the table right here, the issues that we can't run away from. And of course the issue of race as well. Dr. King identified this when he talked about the triplets of militarism, racism, and materialism. And so even though his voice was prophetic, it's time we listen to it. And I think Bernie Sanders' campaign for the White House is the appropriate time for us as citizens to take on our responsibility as citizens. And that's why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders.
So we're here in South Carolina, right? This is the first state in which there's going to be, in a Democratic primary or caucus of these first four, we're going to have a majority-minority component. Probably, if history holds, more than 50% of the electorate on Saturday is going to be African American. Part of the reason why people think Secretary Clinton has a great chance of winning this race and winning it by a lot is because she has so much support from the African American community here. All the polling shows it, and the Clintons obviously have a long history of support from African American voters. So why is it that you think Bernie Sanders will be better for African Americans than Hillary Clinton would be?
I think that the issues that Bernie Sanders deals with are not only simply issues around African Americans, but I think they're around all Americans. They're from working men and women. Then those who believe in a participatory democracy and engagement. African Americans have always been at the forefront with its expanding the notion of democracy. We take the Civil Rights Movement. Young people in Mississippi and Alabama in 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. All those things were put into action by African Americans, and particularly young people, but citizens as a whole. So I think that the one thing that there's certainly a sociology around our relationship with the Clintons, you know. But this is not about personalities, the Clinton brand or whatever the personality. This is about how do we now change and reform the system that we live in, the system of politics, the way that we vote, the system that we disengage citizens and everything. How do we engage citizenship? And I think this is the best opportunity to do that.
Now, do you find her just historically, do you find her wanting in some way? There are some African American voters who look back on welfare reform, who look back on the crime policies that she and her husband advocated back in the 1990s, and they say, if you think back to that, Bill and Hillary Clinton were were responsible for some policies that did not were not advantageous to minority communities. Are you among the people who find them wanting in some way, or you just think Bernie Sanders is better?
Well, let's see here. Let's see what the Clinton administration has done. This is NAFTA, her husband.
Yeah.
We can't put this all on her.
Right, agreed.
Absolutely. This is a different animal. You certainly. Hillary Clinton has done a great deal in talking about LGBT rights. She's done a great deal in advocating for women's. I'm not saying that. There's other things that certainly, I'm not here to discuss what her policy, what her foreign policy is, and what her other choices that she's made in terms of domestic policy as a senator and as the Secretary of State. But I know that I have the history of a man from the moment he was the mayor of the small, relatively large city, mid-sized city in Vermont, to the time he was a congressman, to the time he's been in the Senate. It's been consistent. He's taken his money to receive the money to run his campaigns from small donations.
Right.
Not those people who have really hijacked, I think, American democracy.
The Clinton campaign points out, rightly, that there was a time when Bernie Sanders said that he thought that Barack Obama deserved a primary challenge. And he said some pretty critical things about not being a critic of various ways in which he thinks that President Obama has been too incremental, that he hasn't gone far enough, that he hasn't pursued radical enough solutions. They're basically trying to point out, Hillary Clinton says, I'm with Barack Obama. Bernie Sanders casts doubts on Barack Obama. How do you feel about that argument?
It's all right. This is democracy. You know, I had doubts about Obama. The first thing I said with Obama's candidacy is that the candidacy of a black president is not a movement. It's just the candidacy of a black president, in that sense that I think that Bernie Sanders is the one who exemplifies the King legacy. Right. And that's it. And it's a legacy of so many Americans. Emma Goldman, I mentioned, Eugene Debs, who was against the World War I and ran for president from prison because he was in jail for sedition. Yeah. So all these are kind of things in history. This is a historic moment for this country, and I think we have two candidates here. It's obvious that these two candidates represent, in some ways, the desire or yearning for a greater participatory democracy, and that's what I'm about.